Oh, sorry. Well, welcome to this talk. Now, I want to play you a video clip from a Mr. William Gates, and then we'll think about what he said.
Making the mRNA is really easy and really cheap, and that's the magic of this thing. But there's no doubt in the next 5 years, we just need to mess around. There's a lot of lipid nanoparticles, and some are very self-assembling. There's no inherent reason it's not thermostable, it's not cheap, and it's not scalable. And so, as over the 5 years, we fix that part of it, mature it, which is very typical, we'll be able to build factories worldwide that can make $2 vaccines with even less lead time than we've had to have here during this pandemic. And we'll use those, as you suggest. For every disease that we don't have vaccines, we will try mRNA. In fact, for HIV, we have multiple ways. One that's more of a B-cell approach, one that's more of a T-cell approach. For malaria, we have multiple ideas. For TB, we have multiple ideas. And so to fill in the missing vaccines, we'll make a lot of our bets of the Gates Foundation and others who care about global health will be mRNA focused.
Well, quite an interesting talk. mRNA vaccines are easy and cheap, apparently. Well, you wouldn't think it was cheap from the prices being charged by certain manufacturers, pharmaceutical manufacturers at the moment, but we'll let that pass. But over the next 5 years, it looks like there's going to be a lot of money put into innovation of messenger ribonucleic acid technology. And lipid nanoparticles, he mentioned there, as far as I could hear, self-assembly. We're going to get self-assembly of these lipid nanoparticles. Now, quite what is going to self-assemble, I don't really know, and quite where it's going to self-assemble, we need a little more information on that. At the moment, I simply don't know. But this is scalable. This can be brought up to a massive scale with the maturation of the technology, scaling out to the whole world, worldwide factories, global domination, worldwide factories all over the place. Low lead time, in other words, they can identify something they'd like to make an mRNA vaccine for, and then they can make it really, really quite quickly. And they're going to have RNA for every disease we don't have vaccines for at the moment. Now, mentioning HIV, TB and malaria. Now, we could talk about vaccines that there are for all of these, but we will let that pass as well. But it looks like there's going to be a lot of innovation into these new vaccines. And others who care about global health will be RNA focused. So do you care about global health? Well, in that case, it sounds like you're going to be RNA focused. Now, this, of course, is quite incredible, and I expect you'll have some comments to make. Now, as far as I know, Mr. Gates he's not a doctor, he's not a nurse, he's not a pharmacist, he's not a biomedical scientist, he's not a nurse, he's not a dentist, he's not a physiotherapist, he's none of these things. Now, I don't want to be unfair. He may have experience as a hospital porter or even a hospital gardener that I don't know about, but he has no qualifications in these matters. So let me know how comfortable you are with people self-appointing themselves to lead global research on these topics. My big problem is this. When you give a lipid nanoparticle, these tiny lipid nanoparticles, billions and trillions of them, are going to go into the blood. Now, when I say into the blood, that's exactly where they go. We were told they stay in the arm. We now know that is not the case. They are systemically distributed. They go around the body. And they're lipid nanoparticles. They're fatty. They're fatty. Now, the membranes round about all of the cells in your body are fatty. Phospholipid bilayers. So that means that these lipid nanoparticles will come into contact with the cells on the surface of your body, and the membranes will just fuse into one. Just a bit like those bubbles I was playing with actually at the start of the program that you caught me with when I was just entertaining myself. Let's just have a quick look at a quick clip of my bubble mixture and see if this helps us understand what's going on. So the lipid nanoparticles are a bit like this soap you caught me playing with. The nanoparticles, the particles, or the soap bubbles in this case, they just kind of link together. The membranes will bind and they'll become one, and they will absorb into any fatty surface throughout the body. And of course, that will mean they will discharge their contents into that cell. So obviously all demonstrations have their limitations, but I think it gives you the idea. The membranes, the lipid nanoparticle and your own cell membranes fuse together. That lets the RNA into your cell, where it can have various activities inside your individual cells, not restricted to the arm, anywhere the blood goes, anywhere in the systemic circulation, from your toes to your ears, to your heart, to your liver, to your kidneys, to your ovaries, to your testes. It can go anywhere. And we can get this fusion of these lipid nanoparticles, which may be self-assembling. So quite interesting new innovations coming along in the next 5 years. Let me know how comfortable you are with this type of global leadership that we seem to be enjoying at the moment. Let's have another clip.
When we look at vaccines, they were the miracle of this epidemic. They saved millions of lives, but they can be far better. We need to invent easier to deliver vaccines that are just a patch you put on your arm or something that you inhale. We need vaccines that actually block infections. In this case, there were lots of breakthrough infections. We need vaccines that are broad spectrum, so they work against most of the emerging variants, which we did not have this time. And we also need factories that are standing by so we can build enough vaccines for the entire world within 6 months and achieve far better equity. The vaccines can also do something that would be super helpful, which is to help us eradicate entire families of viruses. Innovative new vaccines used properly could get rid of the flu family, the coronavirus family. And there's a huge burden of those, even in non-pandemic years. And if we get rid of it, it can never cause a pandemic. And here's the best part of this. Even when we're not having an outbreak, these investments, like the Lamira, those new vaccines, they will make people healthier. They'll shrink the gap, the health equity gap, which is gigantic, between rich and poor countries. For example, we can detect more HIV cases and do a better job of treatment. We can reduce deaths from malaria. We can get more people high quality care. And so this is not just a downer about how to stop things from getting worse, but also a chance to make things better. If we take the right steps, we can make COVID-19 the last pandemic, and we can build a healthier, more equitable world for everyone. Thank you.
Well, obviously they were just clips, and the whole talk does give a little more nuance and background, so do watch the whole TED Talk for yourself, readily available online. COVID vaccines were miracles that saved millions of lives. I'm not quite sure what the data is for that, but let me know what you think. We need simpler vaccines that can be given via simpler routes to get vaccines into as many human beings as possible to block infection. We need factories for the entire world. We're thinking here on a global scale. Carrying on a global scale. I mean, my personal view on this is that all mRNA lipid nanoparticle technology should be completely, a moratorium should be completely put on it until we know what the heck's going on. Because at the moment I don't think we do, but Mr. Gates here is thinking about a vaccine factories for the entire world. You might find that idea completely terrifying. And this idea about eradicating families of virus, to me, makes no sense at all. Eradicating influenza viruses, eradicating coronaviruses. I mean, these are part of the ecosystem of the planet. They are in animals all around the world. They're in ecosystems all around the world. A few of them affect people. The idea that you could eradicate a class of viruses, to me, just sounds like complete nonsense, to be quite honest. I really don't know what he's talking about for that particular point. There are billions of types of viruses out there, billions of types, trillions of types, not just viruses. I mean, how you could eradicate a whole class of viruses from the terrestrial ecosystem. And even if you could, would that be desirable? Because the key word I've just used there is ecosystem. these viruses are there for a reason. They're part of ecosystems. So I'm not quite sure we'd want to eradicate them, whatever that means. New vaccines will make people healthier. Now, we do agree on the gap between rich and poor countries, but we might have varying ideas on how that should be achieved. And that this will be the last pandemic, unfortunately, I don't think Mr. Gates has the totality of the answer to that. So this is just rather strange, really. But anyway, let's not go beyond the information we have. You have the information from the videos. Draw your own conclusions from that, and do let me know what you think, and let's make this a matter for ongoing public debate. But for now, thank you for watching.
Well, a bombshell development now for all those people that called the COVID vaccines safe and effective. AstraZeneca has just announced the worldwide withdrawal of its Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. They say it's because of a totally rare but serious side effect. Former British Prime Minister, of course, once called the drug a triumph for British science, and he said it saved 6 million lives. Those are his words. Someone who knows all about the rare side effects is epidemiologist Nick Hulscher from the Peter McCullough Foundation, and we invited this esteemed individual on our show. Nick Hulscher, great to have you on the show to dive deep into the side effects and everything else related to AstraZeneca. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So let's get into why did AstraZeneca actually pull this vaccine? I seem to remember, Nick, members of parliament, esteemed doctors, cardiologists, world-renowned doctors, telling us of the problems with this drug a long time ago. Did they just learn now about the rare side effects, and that's why they decided to pull this, or was something else at play?
So the primary reason that AstraZeneca gave for this recent global withdrawal was actually for commercial reasons. They said that because nobody wants the vaccine, they're just going to pull it off the market, or they're going to lose a bunch of money. Now, back in 2021, there was a large number of side effects identified. But first, we'll go into just a brief introduction on what this vaccine is. So what the AstraZeneca, it goes under the brand names Covishield in India, AZD1222. It's actually a modified chimpanzee DNA adenovirus that encodes for the highly toxic spike protein. So this vaccine was authorized for emergency use in December of 2020. So that was the first country that saw this vaccine. It's cheaper than Moderna and Pfizer mRNA vaccines, easier storage requirements. So that's why it's actually been used in India. It's been used in some countries in Africa. It's been used in Asia, mainly in low-income countries, just because of those reasons I mentioned. Easier access to them. And so it was never approved in the United States because we were kind of concerned about the trial data, and we already had two other vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, so AstraZeneca had a really hard time getting into the United States. So back in 2021, there was a large amount of side effects that were uncovered from these vaccines, and the primary one that was admitted in court recently is vaccine-induced immune thrombotic thrombocytopenia. So what this syndrome is that your body develops blood clots everywhere. It's accompanied by low platelet counts. There was 445 confirmed cases of this in the United Kingdom, and 81 of them were fatal.
Wow.
So, and many papers have showed a causal link between the AstraZeneca vaccines and fatal thrombocytopenia, including our paper, a systematic review of autopsy findings and deaths after COVID vaccination. We collated a few of those cases and proved they were due to the vaccine. But that's just the primary side effect that was identified in 2021, and it actually should have prompted market withdrawal, 3 years ago. Not 3 years later now, where many people have already died from it. It would be appropriate if AstraZeneca apologized for any damages caused and provided compensation for all the individuals that were harmed. Because, even one death is too many deaths. So, they have, AstraZeneca has a ways to go. Moderna and Pfizer, they're behind AstraZeneca. They still have their mRNA vaccines on the market in the United States for ages 6 months and older. So, hopefully Moderna and Pfizer follow in the footsteps of AstraZeneca
and pull these things off the shelf. I know your colleague, Dr. Peter McCullough, has been pushing for this, of course, to have these things removed. What did we see in the trial data? Well, because as I said in my intro here, former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson called this a triumph for British science and that this saved 6 million lives. So I want you to unpack that in a second. I mean, what is he basing that on? That we saved 6 million lives from AstraZeneca?
So they base these claims off of studies that come out that kind of just hypothesize. They come up with equations. They see and try and say how many lives they saved. It's really mostly nonsense because it's highly difficult to predict that number accurately. But they may, if they did save some lives, they also took some lives. And they took some lives through some side effects that were uncovered in the trial data. And these side effects include, like I mentioned earlier, the vaccine-induced immune thrombotic thrombocytopenia that killed 81 people in the UK, confirmed. There's probably many more. Those were just the cases that were reported. There's also cerebral venous sinus thrombosis. This is a blood clot that occurs in the brain's venous sinuses, and it actually prevents blood from draining out, leading to hemorrhaging, brain bleeding. It also is linked with just general thrombosis, just blood clots over the body. Again, this is likely due to the spike protein that's produced by the chimpanzee DNA viral vector, goes into your cells and codes for the spike protein. Your body attacks those cells because it detects a foreign antigen. And spike protein has been shown to coagulate blood, makes blood resistant to cleavage of these by your own body. So that's why you see these fibrogen-resistant blood clots. And we also these vaccines have been linked with Guillain-Barré syndrome, as well as capillary leak syndrome, which is a rare and serious condition that causes fluid to leak from tiny blood vessels, leading to swelling and low blood pressure. So overall, the safety profile is not great. They should have been pulled off the market 3 years ago.
So I want to go back to the trial data real quick, which is, I can't believe, but in the United States, we put our foot down. Like, we've allowed Pfizer and Moderna to move forward, and of course, still to this day, still moving forward with emergency use authorization for that. And normally, these trials, you would take 10 years to bring a proper vaccine to market. These things were obviously rushed to market. We know from the trial data in those other vaccines, there were no human trials, right? Or very little as it related to boosters and others. They were testing it on 11 mice. I think that was about it. So what did we see in the trial data for AstraZeneca that was like an alarm bell on the United States, but not in Britain?
Well, the main alarm bell for the United States, again, the primary reason they say their vaccine wasn't in the United States is because Moderna and Pfizer existed. There's probably conflicts of interest. Pharmaceutical capture, they didn't allow AstraZeneca to come here. Now, so that was really their primary reason. We didn't say we didn't take in these vaccines because of vaccine-induced immune thrombocytopenia. And again, that's the syndrome that scared all the European countries after the vaccine rollout. It caused issues there back in 2021. But if they were likely to admit that's why it wasn't distributed here, that would be the reason. That syndrome with the abbreviation VITT.
Do you think we're just getting the tip of the iceberg here? Now they claim we're pulling these off the market because commercially we can't sell them anymore. People just don't want to buy them anymore. They don't want to get these shots. So you know what? It's probably a good time. This all coincides, of course, with the court, with this all with what we learned because of being sued as a result of this. So we wouldn't have even learned this information. They were not forthcoming with this information about these side effects. So they kept all of this hidden from us, didn't they?
Yeah, they kept everything hidden. All of these companies that have distributed COVID-19 vaccines have kept most of the side effects hidden. I mean, in the VAERS system, the CDC VAERS system, there's over 30,000 deaths that have been linked to these vaccines. So, we don't hear that in the mainstream news. That we don't hear that by the vaccine manufacturers that their products might have killed tens of thousands of people. They don't want people to know about these syndromes. They just kind of want to get it through emergency approval with no proper studies, no proper double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials, just lab rat studies, and they just hope that people take them. And it's very dangerous that that's happening. And it's very unfortunate, but at least we're moving in a step in the right direction. At least AstraZeneca is pulling them off the market. Now we have to be on the lookout for, they're called replicon vaccines. So they're actually up next are self-amplifying messenger RNA vaccines. So what these do, they go in your body, and the mRNA gets in your cell, and it regenerates itself over and over and over again.
Oh,
so
great.
that's what's up next, and hopefully, preliminary studies show that the side effect profile of these upcoming replicon vaccines is pretty bad. About 95% experience adverse events, and it's already been approved in Japan, one of them.
95%.
Now, a lot of them are just local reactions, but 60% of them were systemic reactions. So fever and severe events.
My God, Doc. 95%, and then, 60 systemic events. This is unbelievable. I hope people wake up. I hope people hear this. Of course, this information has been suppressed and blocked and banned all across social media. In the United States, of course, there was the collusion with the Biden administration. We know that from the White House. We know that from internal documents, keeping this information suppressed across social media. Your colleague, Dr. Peter McCullough, of course. We all know about the censorship industrial complex. Hopefully, people ask some serious questions about these things moving forward. I guess, Nick, we're going to see. Well, this is just the tip of the iceberg for lawsuits. Do you think?
Oh yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Once it becomes widely known that these vaccines cause death via various syndromes, including myocarditis, the CDC still doesn't admit that myocarditis is fatal, and our paper proved that in ESC heart failure, the European Society of Cardiology journal. Our paper proved that myocarditis is fatal in 21 cases, and the CDC still doesn't acknowledge. They still call myocarditis mild and transient, which is just completely false. So they're still covering stuff up. So I would be on the lookout for major lawsuits. I think that these companies will most likely be in trouble in the near future, but only time will tell.
Nick Holscher from the Peter McCullough Foundation. Great work, as always, and an epidemiologist who's been tracking this very, very closely. Nick, great to have you here on the show. Thanks so much for your insights and your expertise.
Thanks for having me.
My specialty is molecular pathology and medicine. The pandemic was used as a false pretext by the WHO to drive vaccination of all people in the world. A plan was set up to shorten the time to develop vaccines, which usually takes longer than 10 years, to less than 1 year. Operation Warp Speed. This operation was used to cover up the misconception of the genetic vaccines. Under the pretext of saving time, an extremely dangerous method was selected, that is, intramuscular injection of viral genes to produce toxic spike proteins directly in human tissues to stimulate immune system. Because this is a completely new method and misconception method that has never applied before in human history. It is impossible, therefore, for most of doctors to give proper informed consent. However, due to irresponsible government and media campaigns to promote vaccines, 80% of the Japanese has been vaccinated, unfortunately. 7 shots have been done so far. This is the most and worst in the world, and the result was the induction of the terrible drug-induced injury that has never seen in human history. I believe that the fraudulent use of experimental gene therapy to healthy people, particularly to healthy children, is an extreme violation of human rights. However, Keizo Takemi, Japanese Minister of Health, Labor and Welfare, has been insisting that there is no serious concern about the injury caused by genetic vaccines, and without running from the current situation of injured patients, they plan to construct a new vaccine production system in preparation for the next pandemic. This is an unbelievable, crazy situation. The Japanese government is the first in the world to approve a new type of vaccine called replicon vaccine, and plans to start to supply it in this fall and winter. The Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry is providing a huge amount of subsidies for this project, and factories to produce new vaccines are being built one after another in Japan. I visited these factories directly. Furthermore, the Japanese government is currently soliciting large-scale clinical trials worth $900 million from pharmaceutical companies that are taking on the challenge of developing vaccines to prepare for the next pandemic by Disease X, proposed during the Davos conference this year. It is speculated that the movement by the Japanese government is part of CEPI, Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, 100 Days Mission, which aims to shorten the time to 1/3 of Operation Warp Speed. Namely, they are trying to shorten the vaccine business cycle by developing a vaccine in 100 days. This is possible only by ignoring the human right perspective. Amendments to the WHO, International Health Regulation, IHR, and the so-called Pandemic Treaty, which are about to be adopted at the 77th World Health Assembly this year, are attempting to give rationality and legal binding force to such unscientific and dangerous crazy plans. If such things continue, there is a high risk that Japan-made vaccine will be exported under the guise for false trust. If Japan were to become a perpetrator, it would leave irreparable harm to future generations. Therefore, the actions of Japanese government must be stopped by international collaborations. Although it has already been 3 years since I started to give lectures to educate Japanese people about the dangers of vaccines, it is still difficult to penetrate through the sound barriers of mainstream media. If we tell the truth about vaccines on YouTube, it is deleted within a day. The reality is that we are facing censorship and speech suppression almost every day. Therefore, I put my hope in the publication of a book, which is the last version of speech, and published a book with a title, Withdrawn from WHO. It is difficult to stop this movement because it is now politically hopeless to change the situation of the Japanese government. The message I would like to convey to the world is that when disease X occurs in the future, you should never trust the Japan-made vaccine that was developed in a short period of time. In order to protect human rights in cases of control that transcend national boundaries, I believe that sharing the truth and countries is so important, and that this is a step towards unity and solidarity. Only through the process of information exchange between all countries in the world, we can find hope in the midst of despair. I do hope that my statement will help all of you to protect your healthy life and your family. Thank you very much for your attention.